Reel-01B starts outside the home of Grandma and Grandpa. That's 18 Old Rectory Gardens, near London, England. I'm not sure whether at this stage the lady is called Wendy Kaplan or Wendy Evans. We're all dressed up for something that is to do with our wedding. It is not for the wedding ceremony, for which Wendy wore an orange dress, and of course later for the reception that evening she wore white. We don't have any movies of the wedding ceremony. Movie cameras were somewhat awkward to carry around and were noisy. The next scene is after we are married, and it is Mum's graduation in Oxford. This is one rare case where I've made major changes to the scene using the virtual dub software. The scene was shot at 9 frames per second in order to do a slightly better job of the inadequate light. When it's projected normally at 18 frames per second, it looks jerky and it's over so fast you can't even see what's happening. So I've used the virtual dub software to change it from 9 frames, from the projected 18 frames per second to 9 frames per second. But of course we're still projecting in the movie here at the normal speed, but everything's slowed down by a factor of 2. And the projector click has gone silent because there was only enough recording of the projector click for half of the doubled duration. The movie would have been over when the clicking stopped if we had been projecting it normally. Hopefully you can see Mum in lots of these scenes despite the inadequate technical quality due to the low life. There's your Mum walking up to get her degree. They did it in batches. After graduating, we're back on the Charwell. My baby sister, Hazel, just recently turned 18, was at the graduation ceremony, and we're now introducing her to punting, which is a little bit scary when you first do it. You need some time to get your river legs. The one mistake you mustn't make is to drop the pole so firmly into the bottom of the river that you can't dislodge it. Then after that, the worst mistake you can make is to grimly hold on to it even as the punt continues to sail down the river under its momentum. If this happens, you will be left stranded, clinging to the pole until you eventually drop into the river. A very embarrassing situation which never occurred to either Wendy or me in our many years at Oxford. Nor did Hazel. There's Grandma hanging up the washing, which no doubt resulted from activities associated with our wedding. Now we're flying from London to Larne in Northern Ireland. It is obviously Northern Ireland because nowhere else could possibly look near half so beautiful. I continue to take too many pictures of aircraft landing. I believe this is a Vickers Armstrong Viscount. It's propelled by turboprop engines. These are engines that are pretty much like jet engines, although the front has a propeller, so to the casual eye it would look pretty much like a World War II vintage propeller aircraft, which was propelled by an engine pretty much like a car engine. Now we see Mother driving my mother's car in rural Northern Ireland. She was just starting to learn to drive. She had me as her instructor. Again, you see we're shooting with 40 ASA film, and it's very difficult to do much with the light within the interior of the car. We really do need outside reasonably bright light, which we have here. There is Mum out in the midst of Northern Ireland rural scenery. Looks like the sun is brighter in the background than closer. Here we are along the coast of Antrim. This is just about 20 miles north of where I grew up. Now it's time, unfortunately, to leave Northern Ireland. Wish I'd got more pictures there. We're on a ferry from a town in Northern Ireland called Larne. It's quite close actually to where Stephen lives. It has a port, and this ferry is taking us to another town in Scotland called Stranraer. It's quite a small crossing, about 22 miles. Once we get to Stranraer, we have a long drive to the Glasgow area. It's a drive in my mother's car, which is on board the ferry. There were 3 of us on the trip. My mother, your mother, and me, your dad. The ferry is clearly of Swedish registry because this is the Swedish flag. We've now arrived in Scotland. I got no movies of any interactions with relatives or anything like that. Mother also took rather ill on the trip. There was marvellous scenery in Scotland. We've arrived at the Firth of Clyde, where the ship that is to take us to Canada, namely the Empress of Canada, sits in the bay there, awaiting our arrival. Very pretty looking ship. The last time I saw it, I'm afraid, was in the Naval Museum in Washington, where there was a piece of it on display. The world hadn't a need for the number of ships that existed in 1966. We were using this for transportation, not for a cruise. This was much cheaper than flying at the time. And we had our worldly goods with us. And one of the nice things about going by ship, you could take a lot of worldly goods with you. We had 2 or 3 chests full of what we had acquired at that stage of life, which was fortunately not all that much. But everything that was going with us was on board the ship. We're now on a tender approaching the Empress of Canada as we are about to come on board. We have a piper to welcome us. As I recall, the ship had come from Southampton, so it already had passengers on board. Now, this is not the Empress of Canada. This is the Empress of England, a sister ship. We're in the middle of the Atlantic. This is the Empress of England photograph from the Empress of Canada. It was all very exciting when the 2 ships passed each other in mid-Atlantic. You can see the water was absolutely calm. It's not like the sort of pictures you normally see of the Atlantic, which is if it is a very fierce ocean, which of course it can be at times. Much to Mother's relief, we encountered no rough weather of any sort. Smooth the whole way. So bye-bye, Empress of England. And on board there were lots of activities because it was about a 5-day ride. Fortunately, our ping pong has improved a great deal since then. And there's Mum at the stern. Only the first-class passengers have access to the bow. That is the standard arrangement. Whereas the first-class passengers can go anywhere. But the class of travel we had. I've forgotten what euphemism it was called by then, but this was the class that almost everybody travelled on. They did not have access to parts of the ship that were reserved for first class. And this is inside our cabin. Very nice. Not enough light to get a really acceptable picture. Didn't feel that this was of such value that it was worth doing anything to try to squeeze anything more out of it. And on deck, it's very, very pleasant way to spend 5 days. You can see even in the class of travel we were on, there was lots of space, nice facilities. This is the red ensign, the flag flown by merchant ships in the UK. My late dear friend Peter Gillespie, his yacht Cara flew the red ensign when it was sailing, as you might observe in some of the pictures I have from it. Ping pong wasn't the only sport we had on board. Shuffleboard is much more sociable activity. You can talk to the other people you're playing with. It had a lot of skill, but also a lot of luck. Now we are coming in to moor the ship at Quebec City, our first port of call after crossing the Atlantic. The building dominating the skyline is the Chateau Frontenac, one of the many impressive hotels throughout Canada that was associated with one of the railroads, the Canadian Pacific, I believe. The railroads were, of course, very important in the history of Canada and still are much more important than Amtrak is in the United States. We're just about to drop the gangplank so that we can let some passengers off at Quebec City, others stayed on for the rest of the trip to Montreal as we did. Here we see the gangplank is also in the possession of the Canadian Pacific Railroad. And that ends the second part of Reel 1. We've now completed Reel 1.